that he would have a home in what he has created. I don't understand that. A God who lacks nothing, who's all sufficient, that still looks for a home. And that's why he created Adam in the first place, that he might bestow his passion on him. And David's ageless purpose was a dwelling place for his God. He was consumed with it. 2 Samuel 7:2 says, "Here I am, living in a palace of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." David was obsessed with finding a resting place for the ark, for the presence of God. At one point, it says in Psalm 132, at one point he refused to go home or sleep until he found a place to build it. He was consumed with finding a place, a dwelling place for God's presence. Later in his zeal for it, he gave his personal wealth. He didn't just give his donations. Later, he gave of his own wealth for this place for God. 1 Chronicles 29. And after occupying Jerusalem, which had never happened before, and David did it with, he was on the run from Saul, you know the story. David sneaks into Saul's camp, takes his sword, and shows it to him. See, he was a boy. He played tricks. Played tricks. My little grandson, Ajax, he'll be out with me, and if I don't have a shirt on, and even if I have a shirt on, he'll be playing around with me, and I can see the twinkle in his eye. And all of a sudden, he'll pinch my nipple, and he'll stop. And I will go, "Ouch! You tricked me!" And he loves it. Because he's a boy. And David, Saul goes into the cave to relieve himself. And he's out to find David and kill him. And David is hiding in the very cave that Saul comes into. And in the quiet and in the shadows and the darkness of the cave, he takes his knife and cuts a piece off of his robe. And when Saul goes out and back to his army, David comes out of the mouth of the cave, up on the hill, and waves the piece of Saul's robe and says, "I could have killed you, but I just took a piece of your robe." David was a boy. There was something about his nature that when he occupied Jerusalem, formerly known as Salem, the place where Melchizedek was, the place where Abraham went and paid tithes to Melchizedek, a type of Christ. And he takes possession of the ark and brings it to the holy city. Now, you know the story. John has referenced this story this week, how there was a way that it had to be done. David didn't do it the right way, and fear came upon the people. Do you know that David broke the fear of God for his generation? Mm-hmm. You see, God had a way to be approached, but he didn't mean for us to be afraid of him.
Yes, sir.
He had no intention for us to be afraid of him. It was just that he had a process by which he would be approached. Mm. And it was a setup. It was a, you know that God is childlike? Mm. It's a setup. Because God had something great that was coming down to him. And so David finally gets the ark to the holy city. And then he creates a new dwelling for it, known then and now as the Tabernacle of David, the theme of our week. 2 Samuel 6:17 says, the ark placed in the tent of David. It was placed there. And in Isaiah 16:5, Moab's prophecy that a throne in love in the tabernacle of David. Amos 9:11-9 promises to raise up the tabernacle of David. What is it? What is the tabernacle of David? It's a little canvas tent. Hmm. It's a huge, huge downsize from Moses' tabernacle. Hmm. It's a little canvas tent erected on Mount Zion. It's there for 40 years. 40 years. Now let me explain a little bit about the tabernacle of Moses. The tabernacle of Moses was intricate. It was a tent as well, but there was many parts to it. And I feel for Moses. I almost feel when I get to heaven, I'm going to have to say, Moses, I'm so sorry you had to do that. Because there was days he set that thing up, and before the day was out, he had to tear it down. Because the cloud was moving, and they had to pack up and move with the cloud. No wonder Moses went up on Mount Horeb and never came back. It's all yours, Joshua. There was a lot of work around the tabernacle. There was daily activities. There was a priesthood set up for the administering of the tabernacle. And there was an outer court. And then there was an inner court. In the inner court, there was all kinds of ceremonial washing and things that you had to do. And there was the slaughter of the lamb. And you had to bring doves. I mean, talk about the Humane Society. Well, they weren't around those days. And so then, there was the Holy of Holies. And that Holy of Holies had a veil that was a thick material. It was layered material. It was heavy. There was no opening in it. When the priest would go in, he'd have to get on his knees and crawl underneath the veil to get in. And he only did it, as Norma said, once a year. When he went there to offer sacrifices, he'd already offered one for himself before he went in. Because if he didn't, he might not come out. And so out of that developed this fear of God. There's a point in their history when they are in the wilderness that the people come to Moses and say, you have to remove the tent of God. Because it was always in the middle of the camp, and all the other tents were around it. It was in the center of their camp. And they said, we can't handle God up this close. You've got to move him outside the camp. And it's a picture of Jesus being crucified outside, put outside the city of Jerusalem. You got to remove him. It was a very involved thing. When you were farming or whatever you did, you had to make sure that you were picking the very, very best lamb that you had in your flock. You couldn't come with just any old lamb. So the tabernacle of Moses was a very involved thing. So there are two tabernacles during this time operating. One is in Gibeon, the Moses one. And one now is in Zion, the David one. Moses only fully active, like everything is going, everything is being done, the sacrificial program, everything is all in place. But there's one problem. There's no ark. There's no ark. And yet they're going about it as if the ark was there. They're doing it all as if the presence of God was with them. But God's not there. I can't imagine how onerous that must have been for them. Going through the emotions, but not having their presence. Wow. I wouldn't want to do this life without Jesus. Mm-hmm. Especially now as I get older and going, wow, how do people get old without Jesus? I mean, they get old, don't they? They get old. But how do they do it without Jesus? When there's no hope. I go into the shut-ins because they just gave me the seniors to pastor now. So I've just graduated at First Assembly. Funny thing is they didn't take anything else off my plate. Well, they took the parking team off. Thank you, you're so nice. And so now I'm with the seniors and we go into the shut-ins. And you see these people in these homes. And you walk through the doors as they open, and everybody kind of lifts as if, are you here to see me? Everybody in your church are just sitting and they're just slumped, and you walk through the door and there's like, oh, who's this? Are they here to see me? I wouldn't want to get old without Jesus. So we're trying to find a way to reach these. We're planning the first seniors conference that I've ever known.